So we're just about to go flying. Aircraft's been checked out. Just thought I'd show you the rotor teeter system. So the brake is engaged at the moment, so I'm going to move it into flight. Disconnect the rotor tie and then just pull the rotor around and you can see how it's free moving. I have to clean it up, bit of bird muck. But then if you look here, the clearance versus the prop is not great. So let's just give it a spin. And you can see how it's teetering fine. The blade is now rising, and on the other side it's falling.
Today's flight is a short one from Ashcroft up north through the low-level corridor between Manchester and Liverpool towards the Thelwall Viaduct and then heading northeast in towards and landing at Manchester Barton, place I've never been to in the Gyrocopter. I have flown in fixed wing but I haven't as yet taken the gyro, so I thought I'd give it a go today. You might have been able to hear a couple of brief hissing sounds, and that's when I'm pushing forward on the trim to release air from the trim system. There's quite a lot of force required to push the stick forward before you've trimmed properly. And now we're just about to turn right into the low-level corridor between Manchester and Liverpool zones. Very crowded airspace region. All the traffic, north-south traffic that's wanting to avoid transiting either zone ends up squeezed into this narrow corridor. Maximum altitude is 1,300 feet, which feels fine in the gyrocopter, but uncomfortably low in a fixed wing. So it's a case of keeping a very good lookout. All lights, strobes, landing lights, etc. on. Just approaching the Barton overhead, and today I was performing a standard overhead join at 1,800 feet on the Q&H. You can just see an aircraft airborne from runway 26 right, just about to go over the motorway now. I was aware that there was traffic also passing through the overhead, a helicopter coming from the north, and there was nothing else in the circuit. So I was about to descend now. You can see I'm just descending down to 1,700 feet, just to make sure I've got separation between myself and the incoming helicopter. It does feel a little strange after the altitude constraints in the low-level corridor. We're actually nearer Manchester Airport now, but the base of the airspace here is 2,000 feet. And Barton itself requires an overhead join at 1,800 feet above ground level, which is 73 feet elevation. So to overhead join, you're at 1,873 altitude, which is just 127 feet below the base of Manchester airspace. So you have to keep a good lookout on the altimeter. We're just turning over the runway threshold now. Runway 26 right was in use, and we're descending dead side. You can hear the power coming back. In a gyrocopter, the dead side descent very straightforward. Into wind as we are now, power comes back, you basically do a hovering descent. You can see we're hardly moving across the ground, just remaining on the dead side. We're just turning downwind right hand for runway 26, tracking the M62. And then in front of us we can see the bridge carrying the M60, which is effectively our base turn, and then Trafford, Chill Factory, ski slopes, and Manchester beyond. So with the westerly runways in use, like they were today, absolutely no problem if you had an engine problem on climb out, but we're effectively now looking at the easterly section of land beyond the airport, and engine out options here are few and far between, so I would personally avoid flying into Barton with an easterly wind, meaning the easterly runways were in use, because the engine out options are just not great. So now we're tracking base, tracking along the M60, and we can see the field just off to the extreme right of the picture. I'm beginning descent at this point. So we're just about to turn final, and it was 26 right, 26 left. Apparently it was a little bit waterlogged, so 26 right was in better condition. Runway was pretty much into wind, so you can see that we're not going to use very much of it before we're ready to taxi off. And we're down. I was impressed with Barton, and particularly the FISOs, the Flight Information Service officers, were very professional and very helpful. However, this section here, which connects the end of the asphalt taxiway with the 26 runway thresholds, is in terrible condition. You can see I'm being shaken about all over the place here, and that really could do with a bit of work. There's another big hole coming up here. I wanted to make sure I'd passed over that before pre-rotation, and then adding power would not have been great for the undercarriage to hit that at speed. So we're lined up and just about to commence pre-rotation. Now at this point there was a lovely executive helicopter coming in to my right, and he was just entering a hover and waiting for me. I'm not great at recognising helicopters, but it certainly looked fancy. Retractable undercarriage. So he was sat there waiting for me, and I was conscious of the risk of his downwash, but he was off to my right hand side and the wind would have been blowing that away from me, so it was not really a problem. The nose wheel's coming up. And then we're up, and you can see my main wheel has stopped rotating immediately, so that's one for my engineer to have a look at. I think I've got slightly sticking brake. And said helicopter pilot at this point comes across on the radio and says, "That just looks like too much fun." And there's me admiring his helicopter. To which the FISO responded, "Not for me." And I guess that is a view a lot of fixed-wing pilots take of gyrocopters. And that was my view, really, for some time until I made the fateful decision to have a go in one. They do look exposed, they do look a little bit flimsy, a little bit lightweight perhaps. But the reality is, once you're up there, you don't feel exposure. I'm not a great fan of heights, but you really do not feel it. So here's the takeoff from the nose cam, mainly just so you can see the helicopter just up towards the top right and just how close he was. Just approaching the ASHCROFT overhead, and if you look carefully you might be able to count the 5 runways. There now follows a textbook case of how not to land a gyrocopter. This was supposed to be a glide approach into runway 27 at ASHCROFT. So the power's come back, but I now figure that I'm too high. So this is a hovering descent when you pull the stick back and you want to see your airspeed come to around 30, and then you recover. The idea is during that period you're losing a little bit of altitude. So I was still too high, so another hovering descent. But what I've forgotten at this point is actually most of the altitude that you lose is at this point now, when the nose comes down and you regain flying speed. This is the point at which you actually descend. And as I'm about to discover, we're now too low, so you can hear power being added. It's a real hodgepodge of an approach, this one. And you'll also spot that my airspeed is getting a little on the low side. Should be 60. But it was a little low, which means that there's little energy left to actually flare. So if you watch, the mains are down now. But I wasn't happy with that approach, so here we go. Let's do it again. Full power, stick remains back. In my slight defence, I was making life more difficult than it needed to be. Power on approaches are easier, but it's good practice to do glide approaches. It certainly constitutes a big part of your training, and it's inherently safer. If you can pick your IDP, your initial descent point, correctly, that's the key to the whole approach, then you don't need to add power from this point on. So here we go, number 2, and as you're about to see, it's not much improved. Once again, I figured I'm too high, I left my IDP too late, so we're about to do a hovering descent. Here we go. And you can hear the G force building up in the rotor, and then it gives you the chopping sound that's perhaps more typically associated with helicopters, and then it's the recovery. So the speed is 30, and it's at this point now that you really do lose the altitude. But once again, I've lost too much altitude and power is required. One saving grace of this approach is I did keep the speed up. And you do need airspeed on landing. It's what enables you to flare and cushion the descent. I was fortunate with the prior approach that my flare coincided just at the point that the energy was the rotor was about to expire. The touchdown was fine, but this one now you can see we are flaring, holding off now, travelling a lot further on the ground, but it is inherently a safer approach. So, first trip in the gyro to Barton. Very enjoyable, short flight, well under half an hour each way, but definitely somewhere that I will return to. As ever, I hope you enjoyed this flight. If you did, please do click like and subscribe. Thanks very much, and I'll see you again soon.